Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time.
Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. Many years ago, and this is going back almost 20 years ago, I was sitting at a cafe in Auckland, and a friend who was having a coffee with me asked me, how do you write these stories? How do you write these stories when you put them in your articles? And I had never thought about them. But he wasn't just referring to the stories that I tell, but also what you'd call metaphors or analogies. And to be perfectly clear, I don't like the word metaphor or analogy. It's a different type of story where you're trying to get a message across to your reader or your listener. And you're giving an example. You're saying, imagine you've bought a new computer, or imagine you've just been on a trip. Effectively, you're taking that reader or listener to a completely different location with your example, and in doing so, you make things simpler. You make them understand what it is that you wanted to get across. There are 3 ways in which you can create these metaphors. The first is by putting in something that the reader is not expecting. The second way is by doing a dramatic U-turn. And the third way is something you're expecting, but it feels new in the context. Let's start out with the first one, which is something that you're not expecting. Imagine a 1,000-piece puzzle. To take on a 1,000-piece puzzle, you need to know what it looks like in a completed form, and then slowly and systematically, you're able to put the pieces together. Even with the completed version, it is a difficult process working out what goes where. Now imagine that same 1,000-piece puzzle, but it just has 50 extra pieces. Those pieces don't fit anywhere, but they're just enough to cause an enormous amount of chaos. Life is like that 1,000-piece puzzle. You have 1,000 things to do. However, every now and then, you get another 50 random pieces that are added to your day, your week, or the month. What seems complicated in the first place has now turned quite chaotic. This is what adults call stress, a situation that is challenging but goes completely haywire. However, what if we looked at stress in a different way? So that was the first example where we looked at something that you're not expecting. We had the 1,000-piece puzzle. We started out with something really boring, and then we added 50 extra pieces. You're not expecting that. You think that the 1,000-piece puzzle will roll out like somebody looking at the puzzle and then solving the puzzle, and it goes a completely different way. That takes you by surprise. That alerts you. But we didn't do anything dramatic. What did we do in example 1? We looked at a boring story, which is solving a jigsaw puzzle. Then there's a tiny tweak in the sense that it's a 1,000-piece puzzle. Still nothing exciting. But then we add 50 random pieces that don't fit anywhere. And that's something that's not expected. So something that's not expected is always going to get the attention of your reader or your listener. And that's how we finish our first example. Let's go to the second example, or the second method, and that is to take a U-turn. Imagine you were on a weight reduction diet that worked way beyond your wildest imagination. You were told that with the diet, you lose about half a kilo every week. Instead, in the first week, you lose 2 kilos. As the weeks pass, it looks like this. Week 1, 2 kilos down. Week 2, 2 more kilos down. Week 3, 2 more additional kilos. Week 4, yes, another 2 kilos. You're now already at the lowest weight you need to be. But should we go on? Would it make sense to lose another 8 kilos for the following month and then another 8 in the month of April? If you were to keep at that rate of weight loss, it would be considered problematic. To have success is a great thing, but at some point, that success turns toxic. This is how a lot of entrepreneurs go through their life. They need a starting point of life. They need some amount of success. They also need a continuation of that success. However, what they're trained to do is to adopt a form of toxic success. And that's where things go really bad. That's the example number 2. What we've done is taken a complete U-turn. You're not expecting that success would take this really weird pathway. And the method that we used in the second example was we started out the same way with a boring story, which is losing weight. But then we added a tiny tweak in the sense that you're losing not half a kilo, but 2 kilos a week. And eventually, you have to stop. You can't keep going with that weight loss. That would be considered problematic. But your main goal is to show that success is not what it seems, that success can indeed be toxic. And the reader or listener is not expecting this, because we always see weight loss as some sort of success. And now you made the success toxic. What seemed like a really good thing is now something that has to stop. So far, we've seen 2 kinds of metaphors. We started out with something that was not expected. And then the second metaphor is still something that's not expected, but it's a dramatic U-turn. It's not gentle like in the first example where you just added a few pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. The second type of metaphor seemed to be going one way and then suddenly makes a U-turn. This takes us to the third one, which is something that you're expecting, but it feels new in the context. You know this one? It's from the Brain Audit. Imagine you put 7 red bags on a plane. When you get off on the other side, you're expecting the 7 bags to show up. You're waiting at the airport and the first red bag rolls off and you take it off the conveyor belt. Then the second and the third and the fourth. Then there's a green bag, a polka dot bag, some cardboard boxes, and there it is, the 5th bag and then the 6th bag. So when do you leave the airport? You leave when you have all the 7 red bags. Even if one bag is missing, you are confused as what action to take next. This kind of confusion is similar to what happens when clients are buying a product or a service. They have 7 issues that need to be considered, and if you cover 6 and leave just 1, the client stops short. They're confused. This is why you need to know exactly what the bags are, so that instead of leaving your clients confused, they move to the next stage. Those 7 red bags are what's described in the book called The Brain Audit. It's time to find out more about every one of those bags and to avoid the confusion. What did we see in example number 3? Once again, it's a boring story. Bags coming off after a flight has landed. But there's a very tiny tweak, and that is the last bag goes missing. However, nothing is unusual. Nothing's unusual in this story at all. What's unusual is the way the story is told, including the addition of the polka dot bags, the cardboard boxes, etc. But finally, it's almost like you're expecting the bag to go missing. It's a new context. Not many of us have missing bags when we land at airports. We do sometimes, but very rarely. But we're expecting it. And this tiny tweak of something you were expecting, but in a new context, that's what makes the third type of metaphor work. And that brings us to the end of this podcast, where we learned how to create a really interesting metaphor. The main thing that we have to pay attention is that we don't need something spectacular. We're not telling stories. We're just writing a metaphor, and it needs to be boring. Right now, I'm speaking to the microphone. That's boring. I'm going to turn on my computer or turn it off. That's boring. Something that's very everyday is where we need to start. So look around you and look at all the things you're doing, like washing dishes or putting the clothes out to dry. These are very boring things, and you need to start with something boring. But then we have three directions which we can go. And the first is that it's something that's unexpected. You're putting the clothes out to dry and a seagull shows up. That's unexpected. The second method is a U-turn. And that's where you're going in one direction, where you say you've turned on your computer, everything's working, and then suddenly something happens. Maybe the computer drops to the floor, or it blows up, or something happens where the reader is just not expecting something like that to happen, and that's a U-turn. The third method is something you're expecting, but it feels new in the context. We were expecting to get all the 7 red bags off the conveyor belt. Or maybe one bag would go missing. So it's something that's kind of expected, and you can take it to the end point. In the brain audit, we also talk about someone walking down the road, and then they step in dog poo. That's kind of expected. What's going to happen next? Well, you know what's going to happen. You're going to scrape until all of that dog poo comes out. That's not unexpected, but it's in a different context. It's in your book, it's in your podcast, it's in whatever presentation you're making, and they're not expecting it. So the context is brand new. What's the one thing that I would do today? The thing that I would do today is to pay attention to the boring things that you're doing. We do boring things every single day, but we don't pay attention. And you want to write down maybe a list of 5 or 6 or 7 boring things that you're doing every single day. It shouldn't take that long. The very next thing that you do is going to be boring, and the thing after that is going to be boring. And there will be about 100, 200 things that you'll do that are superbly boring today. And they all form the basis of a new metaphor, and you use one of these methods. The first is unexpected, the second is U-turn, and the third is something that's expected but new in the context. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics Land. One of the things that we are most fearful is that machine learning, or AI as we call it, is going to replace us, that somehow this is the end for us. And what you need to explain to your clients is why you are different, why your product is different, why your service is different. You can't just say, I'm like everybody else. I do brand design. I am a copywriter. You have to have a system that explains why this product or that service is different from everything else out there. And it's a bunch of steps. And this is why we have a course. I mean, there are lots of articles on uniqueness that we put out. They're all free. There are some YouTube videos. You can watch all of them. But the course, it goes into it step by step and in detail. And you can check it out. You can go to psychotactics.com/U goodies. U stands for uniqueness and goodies. And then sign up and you'll get some of the goodies, and you can evaluate them and see if the uniqueness course is suited for you. So go to psychotactics.com/U goodies. On the 24th of March, We will be making this available for a smaller list, those of you that have signed up to the uGoodies. So go to psychotactics.com/uGoodies and judge for yourself. We're also going to be in Portugal, Singapore, and Germany. That's in Lisbon, Singapore, and Munich. Make your way there. Show up, because just leaving home, that journey, and going back, that journey, those are times of reflection. Most people, they go to a workshop, they go to a meetup, and they think, well, that's the reason why I'm going. But often there's all of this dead time going to a place and coming back. And that's when you get an idea. That's when you formulate a strategy. So what I'm saying is that, yes, you're going to meet up with us, but I think that going to the place by yourself, away from your work and your family and everything else, and then going back, that is probably more crucial than anything else to get you to think and reevaluate what you're doing. We're also having a photography workshop, and this is for just 6 people. It's unusual. It's not something that we've done before. But if you come there, you will become a much better photographer. You will start to see rather than take pictures. Because that's what photography is about. That's what drawing is about. That's what a lot of things are about the ability to see things before you put it to paper or before you click that shutter. All of these events are on the Psychotactics site, so go to Psychotactics and you'll see an events button, and with a little luck, we'll meet you in either Singapore, Portugal, or in Munich, Germany. I'll say bye for now, and we'll see you in Psychotactics land. Bye-bye. Still listening? When we started out with our business, which now goes all the way back to 2000, so that's almost 24 years ago, I used to go to different events. I used to wake up early in the morning, and then there would be some kind of meeting that people would have, and I would make a presentation. This was a presentation of the brain audit, a very early version of the brain audit. And I wanted to wake them up. I wanted them to see me as a good speaker. And that's where I used to use this metaphor. So what I'd do is I'd keep a chair, which was kind of reserved, but it would be within the audience. And then as I started to speak, I would step down from the podium or step from wherever I was making the presentation, and then get into the audience space and pull that chair and take it to where I was standing. And this automatically raised the awareness level. There weren't mobile phones back then, not the kind that we have now. There were fewer distractions. But audiences are still in their world. It's still 7 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, I get the chair, and this is what I'd say to the audience. I'm going to sit on this chair and then stand up. I'm going to sit on this chair and stand up. I'm going to sit on this chair and stand up. And this would mystify them because it was something unusual. This was a U-turn for them in a way. They saw the boring activity of sitting in the chair, but now I was standing up and doing it repeatedly. What was the story all about? And that's when I would go into my metaphor. I would turn to the audience and say, how many of us were expecting the chair to break? The reason why chairs don't seem to break is because they're built on some kind of science. Despite us all being of different weights, we don't test the chair before we sit on it because we know that it will work as it should. There's nothing wrong with testing the chair repeatedly, but the result is consistent. The chair doesn't break because there's a science, a logic behind it. And this kind of logic also applies to marketing. We can't go around testing everything in sight. We have to have some kind of structure, some kind of science, some kind of logic. And it's something that every business owner would like to know. Would you like to know it? That's what I'd ask them. And the audience, sleepy as they were, would nod quietly. And that's how it would go into the presentation of the brain audit. So metaphors are a really cool way. And I've had lots of fun over the years just bringing up these metaphors in presentations. And you've read them in articles, you've read them in our books. So get good at them. Listen to this podcast a few times. And if you'd like, join us in 5000 BC because, you make mistakes when you're creating these metaphors. You put in additional stuff that you're not expecting and you wonder why it's not working. Well, in 5000 BC, we can work through it and have been working through it with some of the clients, the members in 5000 BC. So check out 5000bc.com. And yes, if you're looking for uniqueness, go to psychotactics.com/yougoodies. And with that, I'm off on a trip. Yes, I'm making a road trip to Havelock North, which is Hawke's Bay. We're going to be away for a week. Bye-bye.